My solo trip to Paris was finally here, a dream years in the making. But that dream quickly turned into a nightmare when a check-in agent accused my passport of being fake and tossed it into the trash. The air in the terminal had that specific, clinical chill, a sterile mix of floor polish and jet fuel that always signaled the start of an adventure. For me, this wasn't just any adventure. This was Paris, my 30 flirty and thriving solo trip, a birthday present to myself after a year of grinding it out at my design firm. I'd saved every spare dollar, planned every museum visit, and even learned a few clumsy French phrases. My heart was doing a frantic little tap dance against my ribs as I finally reached the front of the Global Wings air check-in line. The agent behind the counter looked like her smile had been surgically removed. Her name tag read Carol, and she wore it like a warning. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a bun so tight it seemed to be pulling her eyebrows into a permanent state of disapproval. I gave her my most dazzling, non-threatening smile. "Good morning. Checking in for the 10:45 to Charles de Gaulle." Carol didn't return the smile. She simply grunted and extended a perfectly manicured hand, palm up. "Passport and confirmation number." I slid my deep blue passport across the cool marble counter. It was one of my most prized possessions. The cover was slightly worn at the edges from previous, smaller trips, each one a memory. Inside was my photo, taken 5 years ago. My hair was different, shorter and in braids, but my eyes and my smile were the same. It was unmistakably me. Carol picked it up with 2 fingers, as if it were something distasteful. She flipped it open to my photo page. Her eyes, magnified by her thin-framed glasses, darted from the laminated picture to my face. Once. Twice. On the 3rd time she paused, her lips tightening into a thin, bloodless line. She tapped a long red nail against my picture. "Is this you?" She asked, her voice flat and laced with an accusation I couldn't yet place. I felt a small, nervous laugh escape. "Yes, of course, that's me. The photo's just a few years old. We all change a bit, right?" I tried to keep my tone light, breezy. Airport security was no joke, and I didn't want any trouble. She ignored my attempt at humor. She held the passport closer to her face, angling it under the harsh fluorescent light as if she were a diamond appraiser looking for flaws. The line behind me was growing, and I could feel the impatient energy of a dozen other travelers boring into my back. "The lamination seems off," she declared, not to me, but to the air in front of her. "And the photo quality is questionable." My smile faltered. "I'm sorry? That's an official passport, issued by the U.S. State Department. It's gotten me into Canada and Mexico with no issues." "I'm not talking about Canada," she sniffed, her gaze finally locking onto mine. It was cold, dismissive. "I'm talking about international travel, to France. We have a higher standard of security." I could feel a slow burn of frustration starting in my stomach. This was ridiculous. "I assure you, it's a legitimate document. I have other forms of ID if you'd like to see them. My driver's license, my work ID." I started to reach into my purse. "That won't be necessary," Carol snapped, cutting me off. She held up the passport, pinching the photo page between her thumb and forefinger. "I've seen enough fake documents to know one when I see one. The background color is a shade too light, and the microprinting is blurred." My jaw dropped. "Fake? You think my passport is fake?" The people behind me were definitely listening now. I could hear a man muttering to his wife. My cheeks flushed with a hot wave of humiliation. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're mistaken. That is a real government-issued passport. That is me. Please, just scan it. You'll see it's valid." Carol let out a short, derisive huff of air. "I'm not scanning a fraudulent document. It's against company policy and federal law." And then she did something I still can't quite process. It happened so fast, yet the moment stretched into an eternity. With a flick of her wrist, a motion of pure, unadulterated dismissal, she tossed my passport. It sailed over the counter in a lazy arc and landed with a soft final thud in the small gray trash bin beside her desk. The entire world seemed to go silent. The cacophony of the airport, the rolling suitcases, the distant announcements, the crying baby down the line. It all faded into a dull roar. All I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own blood in my ears. I stared at the bin, then back at her impassive face. For a second, I thought I must have imagined it, that it was some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Then I found my voice, a strangled whisper. Did you just throw my passport in the trash?" Carol looked straight through me, her expression utterly unchanged. She raised her voice, not in anger, but in a bored, mechanical tone, and called out to the person behind me. "Next in line, please." The words, "next in line, please," hung in the air like a physical blow. For a moment I was paralyzed, my feet rooted to the polished floor. Then a surge of pure, undiluted adrenaline shot through me, burning away the shock and leaving white-hot indignation in its place. "No," I said, my voice shaking but rising in volume. "No, you will not take the next person. You just threw my legal United States passport in the garbage. Get it out. Now." Carol's eyes flickered with something annoyance, maybe even a flicker of satisfaction, but her face remained a stony mask. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You are holding up the line." The man behind me, a portly businessman in a wrinkled suit, huffed impatiently. "Come on, lady, some of us have flights to catch." I whipped my head around to face him. "This agent just threw my passport in the trash. I can't get on my flight." He blinked, his bravado deflating slightly, but a woman behind him scoffed. "Well, if it's fake," she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from my neck to my hairline. I turned back to Carol, planting my hands firmly on the counter. I wasn't screaming, but my voice was hard and loud, cutting through the terminal's hum. "I don't care about the line. I care about the federal document you just disposed of. Retrieve my passport from that bin immediately." "I will not be handling a fraudulent document," Carol said, her voice taking on a robotic, rehearsed quality. "And I will not be digging through the trash. If you don't move, I will call security." "Call them," I challenged, my voice cracking. "Call the police. Call the FBI. Let's have them determine if it's fraudulent, because you, a check-in agent, do not have that authority." That seemed to finally get a reaction. Carol's nostrils flared. She picked up the phone at her station and spoke in a low, urgent tone. Within a minute, a man in a slightly better-fitting suit with a shift supervisor badge hurried over. His name tag read, Henderson. He had a harried look, like this was the 10th fire he'd had to put out before 9 a.m. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, directing the question not to me, but to Carol. "This woman," Carol began, gesturing vaguely in my direction as if I were a piece of unclaimed luggage, "presented a passport that I identified as a potential forgery. The photo quality was poor, the lamination was peeling at the corner, and the security features were not up to standard. When I refused to accept it, she became belligerent. My mouth fell open. Lies. All of it. Peeling? Belligerent? I hadn't even raised my voice until she'd thrown my life in the bin. "That is not what happened," I interjected, looking Henderson directly in the eye, trying to will him to see the truth. She barely looked at it before deciding it was fake. She refused to scan it, and then she threw it in the garbage can. I pointed a trembling finger at the small gray bin. "My passport is in there, right now." Henderson glanced at the bin, then back at me. He gave a sigh that was meant to convey world weariness and patience, but only came across as condescending. "Ma'am, our agents are highly trained to spot fraudulent documents. Carol has been with us for 15 years. If she flagged it, it's because she had a valid reason." A valid reason? Or a bias? The words were out before I could stop them. I saw a flash of anger in his eyes. "There's no need to make baseless accusations," he said, his voice turning cold. "Our policy on fraudulent documents is clear. We do not accept them, and we do not return them. They are to be disposed of." Disposed of? By throwing them in a public trash can? Not by handing them over to TSA or airport police? I was grasping at straws, at logic, at anything that would make this make sense. "Please, just look at it. Take it out of the bin and look at it yourself. Or better yet, call a TSA agent over. Let them look." Henderson shook his head. A final, pitying gesture. "I'm sorry, but we can't do that. For sanitary and security reasons, Once something is in a waste receptacle, our employees are not permitted to retrieve it. There's nothing more we can do for you. You will not be flying with us today. Nothing more we can do. The words echoed in my ears. A death sentence for my dream trip. He was dismissing me. They were both dismissing me. I was being erased. My entire identity, my citizenship, was lying at the bottom of a bin, covered by a discarded coffee cup and a crumpled receipt, and they were telling me it was my fault. Tears of pure, helpless rage pricked at my eyes. And then I saw him. Over Henderson's shoulder, a janitor was making his way down the line of check-in counters. He pushed a large, rolling grey bin, the kind that could swallow a small child. He was methodically stopping at each station, pulling out the small trash bag from the agent's bin, and tossing it into his giant receptacle. He was 2 stations away from Carol's. He was maybe 30 seconds away from my passport. 30 seconds from it being gone forever, lost in the mountain of airport garbage, never to be seen again. My proof, my trip, my name. It was all about to be hauled away to an incinerator. Panic, sharp and electrifying, clawed its way up my throat. I had no time to think, no time to argue or plead. I just acted. With a choked cry, I lunged past Henderson, shoving him aside with more force than I knew I possessed. I vaulted over the low barrier separating the line from the agent's workspace, my carry-on bag thudding against the floor behind me. "Hey, security!" Henderson bellowed, fumbling for his walkie-talkie. Carol shrieked and jumped back from her station as if I were carrying a weapon, but my eyes were locked on one thing only, that small, gray bin. I reached it just as the janitor was reaching for the bag. "Stop!" I yelled, my voice raw. He froze, his hand hovering over the plastic liner. I didn't wait for permission. I plunged my hand into the trash, my fingers brushing past a sticky soda lid and a damp paper towel. And then, there it was. Cool, smooth, and blessedly familiar. I pulled out my passport, clutching it to my chest like a lifeline. It was slightly sticky, but it was whole. It was real. I straightened up, turning to face them. The whole section of the terminal had gone quiet. Every eye was on me. Henderson was sputtering into his radio, and 2 burly airport security officers were already jogging towards us. "I have it," I said, my voice trembling but clear. I held up my passport. "I have my property. The one she threw away. The first security officer, a tall man with a calm demeanor, reached us. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," he said, his voice firm but not aggressive. "I'm not going anywhere until someone acknowledges what just happened," I said, standing my ground. This agent, Carol, profiled me, declared my valid passport fraudulent without any proof, and threw it in the trash. Her supervisor, Henderson, supported her and was about to let it be hauled away like garbage. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Phones were out, recording. The man who had told me to hurry up earlier was now staring, his mouth agape. A woman in the front of the crowd spoke up. "We all saw her throw it away. The passenger is telling the truth." Another voice chimed in. "That's insane. She just tossed it." The supervisor, Henderson, looked pale. The casual authority had drained from his face, replaced by a sheen of panicked sweat. Carol was a statue of indignant fury, but fear was beginning to creep into her eyes. The second security officer was speaking quietly with Henderson, whose story was likely crumbling under the weight of a dozen eyewitnesses with smartphones. The first officer turned back to me. "Ma'am, let me see the document." My instinct was to clutch it tighter, but I knew this was my only chance. I carefully wiped the coffee residue off the cover with my sleeve and handed it to him. Unlike Carol, he handled it with respect. He scanned it with a handheld device. A green light beeped. He opened it, looked from the photo to my face, and nodded. "The passport is valid," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet terminal. He handed it back to me. "The chip is active, and it matches your identity." He then turned his steely gaze on Carol and Henderson. "I'm going to need both of your employee IDs. We'll be filing a formal report with Airport Command and the TSA." The relief that washed over me was so immense my knees felt weak. I leaned against the check-in counter for support, the sticky passport feeling like a winning lottery ticket in my hand. Carol looked like she had swallowed poison. Henderson was stammering, trying to explain his protocol, but the officer held up a hand to silence him. Suddenly, a woman in a crisp Global Wings Air uniform with a pin that said Terminal Director pushed through the crowd. Her face was grim. She had clearly been summoned and briefed. She walked straight up to me, bypassing her disgraced employees entirely. "Ma'am," she said, her voice a mixture of apology and damage control. "On behalf of Global Wings Air, I am profoundly sorry for what you have just experienced. This is not our standard. This is not acceptable. Ever." She turned to another agent who had followed her. "Get this woman booked on the next flight to Paris, first class, and waive all fees. All of them." She looked back at me. "We will also be refunding your original ticket in full and issuing you a $5,000 travel voucher for the distress this has caused." Then she looked at Carolyn Henderson. The apology vanished from her face, replaced by ice. "You two, my office. Now, bring your things. You won't be needing them at this counter again." As security led them away, a small, spontaneous round of applause broke out from the onlookers. I was still shaking, but for the first time that morning, a real, genuine smile spread across my face. I was escorted to a private lounge, given a glass of champagne, and treated like royalty while they sorted out my new ticket. A few hours later, I was sitting in a plush leather seat in first class, soaring 30,000 feet above the Atlantic. As the flight attendant handed me another glass of champagne, I pulled out my passport. It was a little smudged, a little worse for wear, but it had never looked more beautiful. It was more than just a travel document now. It was a testament, a symbol of a fight I didn't ask for, but one I was damn sure glad I won. Paris was waiting, and I had a hell of a story to tell when I got there.